Hello there. Before we get started, I have a gripe, as usual, and a waiver. The gripe. Screenomatic is horrible without editing tools. This is like my 14th take on a 5-minute presentation. I'm never going to get to bed. Hopefully, this is the last one. Second, my slides are very wordy. I took the information from my paper, and I hope you can read faster than I can talk. We'll find out. Moving on. Grading, specifically alternatives to the mighty 100-point scale. We touched on it a couple classes ago for maybe 15-20 minutes. It's incredibly important. I think it needs to have a lot more stage time. And I'm also going to be touching on replacing the zero that you find at the end of the scale. So here we go. What's the gripe? Well, I want to build awareness. I believe that grading promotes learning. If you get an A, you're excited, woohoo, top of the world. If you get an F, you're destroyed. I want to give up. I want to drop out of class. The 100-point scale is grossly flawed and should cease to be used. What's up for discussion? I'm going to be discussing alternatives to the 100-point scale. I'm going to address some common assumptions. I'm going to address some alternatives and a method of comparison. Based on evidence proposed, what do I think? Common assumptions. Because I'm a law and order kind of guy, I need a scale to compare all these things to. So we're going to touch on a typology of evidence: opinion, experience, local evidence, preponderance of evidence, and mathematical certainty. The 100-point scale, the good. It's just been assumed that teachers use this all the time. Everybody knows it, everybody's familiar with it, it's comfortable. Most schools have the variation of a 10 points for A, B, C, and D, and then a 60-point spread for F. The 100-point scale, the bad. Statistically, it's ridiculous and incredibly inaccurate. If you look closely, each grade range is roughly 10 points with the exception of the F, which is 60. This means that anything less than 50 points will be in violation of a principle of ratios. And the truly ugly. Psychologically speaking, the effect of a zero on a student's final grade can be incredibly dramatic. The diluting effect may be exasperated if teachers weigh the importance of behavioral issues differently. And also, using a zero for behavioral issues, totally wrong. So, 2 examples. Student A, great student, gets great grades, gets a zero for being absent, ends up with a 72. Student B, decent grades, gets a 61 for goofing off, has a better grade at 74, I believe. Alternatives to the 100-point scale that I'm going to be touching on: the 50-point scale, the 4-point scale, the 12-point scale, and ZAP. Any day now. The 50-point scale, the pros. It's quite easy to adopt. Just chop that 100-point scale in half. All grades have equal value. You're essentially correcting the scale by putting the floor at 50 points. You're not giving anybody free 50 points, just the floor is reset. The cons of this: it's unfair towards students that work to complete the assignments on time. It inappropriately inflates students' grades. It does not prepare students for real-world situations such as incomplete or late work. Mathematically, students would only need to complete a fraction of work to pass the subject. Case in point, this goof-off gets 4 tests with 50s across the board because he just refused to work. He decides to buckle down, gets a perfect score, and now he's at 60%, which is a D-. The next scale I want to present is a 4-point. We know it because we use it in college and university, so we have familiarity. It's simplistic. You can assign the zero without a statistical inaccuracy, and it avoids giving people 50 points. The cons: we would need to invest a lot of time into rubrics. And teachers would also have to assign fractions for all the grades in between a solid A and a solid B. The 12-point scale. This is not really a point system at all. It's basically graders can use any scoring method they want. You simply convert the grade over to this scale. A is 12 points, A minus is 11 points, so on and so forth. What's the pros? It's statistically accurate. The ability, you can also use a zero if you want to. The advantage of this scale is that you can use any scoring method that you want. The only negative, it's a minor learning curve. I know I'm moving fast, but this is actually a good scale. And finally, ZAP, or zeros aren't permitted. ZAPs are alternative to restructuring the grading system. Students in ZAP schools may be graded on a 0 to 100 scale, but if schools enforce policies do not allow the students to receive a 0. Pros. ZAP policies grant students multiple opportunities. In such systems, quality rather than an option is non-negotiable. And finally, it's requiring students to take time to complete the assignment while losing privileges. The cons. Many students, especially in inner city schools, do not have the support system for an after-school activity such as ZAP. That places also an extra burden on teachers to cover the ZAP classrooms. And finally, a policy could be manipulated by students to create more time. In summary, I presented 4 alternatives to this 100-point grading scale, and there's much to discuss. I've decided to endorse the 12-point scale for a few key reasons. 1, there's no reason to change the internal grading policies. You have the highest level of evidence, mathematically speaking. And finally, you can use any scale you want. So, debate, tear me apart, laugh at me. I don't care. Thanks a lot.